We have traveled a long way through the intricate knots of destiny and choice. We started by asking a deceptively simple question in this quiet, ancient space. Are our paths truly ours to choose, or are they merely lines already etched into the stone? For weeks now, we have wrestled with the notion of fate's authority versus the perceived sovereignty of human will. And what we find is not an answer delivered by some high oracle, but a complex realization that reshapes the very landscape of thought itself. The journey has led us away from seeking a simple culprit, not just fate or only self. Instead, it has taught us to observe the dance between them. Fate, in its grander sense, suggests an overarching necessity, a stream that flows regardless of our wishes. Free will, on the other hand, is the visceral feeling of making a choice, of pushing against the current, believing we steer our own boats through unpredictable waters. The mistake, perhaps, was viewing these two forces as antagonists, as enemies locked in an eternal struggle for dominance. We imagined that if fate were stronger, then all our struggles meant nothing. If free will were absolute, then disorder and chaos would reign without limit. But the wisdom we seek, the true philosophical clarity, demands a higher perspective. They are not rivals. They are collaborators. Imagine life as a magnificent symphony. The composer's hand represents fate, the fundamental structure, the notes that must exist in order to create harmony. These are the constraints of time, the universal laws, the raw ingredients we cannot change. But the musicians, the human beings who perform this symphony, they represent free will. We determine how loudly or softly each note is played, whether we interpret a difficult passage as tragedy or as dramatic strength. The composer provides the framework, but the performance, the meaning and the emotional resonance of that performance, that belongs to us. This understanding requires a profound shift in focus. We must stop asking what will happen and instead start contemplating how we will respond when it does happen. Because the power isn't in determining the incoming tide. The power is in deciding whether you will resist it with futile rage or meet its force with calm acceptance. The seeds of this realization were planted long ago, perhaps as early as observing a simple act, another person's disagreement. You cannot control their thoughts. You cannot dictate the fickle turning of the season's weather. You have no veto over global politics or accidents in distant lands. These are the boundaries of our power. They constitute the stage upon which the play must unfold, fixed by necessity and circumstance. This acknowledgement is not a tragedy. It is profound liberation. It means that while we cannot control what happens to us, we gain absolute authority over one thing, our internal judgment. The inner self, this hidden citadel of consciousness, remains inviolable. Fate may throw the most devastating blows against your outer life. It may strip away fortune, health, or reputation. But it cannot breach the defenses of your mind if those defenses are built upon reasoned discipline and acceptance. This is where true freedom resides. Think of endurance. When faced with unavoidable suffering, say a prolonged period of loss, our initial instinct is often to resist violently. We cry out against the injustice of it all. But Stoicism offers a subtler path. Not merely accepting what is, but actively choosing how we interpret it. Suffering, in itself, is an event, a raw, neutral fact. It is the judgment upon that event, the judgment that this cannot happen to me or this should not be this way, that builds suffering into our souls. This separation of fact from interpretation is perhaps the most challenging philosophical ascent we undertake today. We are tasked with becoming philosophers in moments of crisis, capable of pausing the reflexive drama and observing merely what is. What does a raw difficulty mean? It simply means, this thing exists now. And how do I relate to its existence while retaining my internal peace? The greatest act of free will is not the dramatic choice, the sudden rebellion against the odds. No, it is the quiet, sustained refusal to let external events dismantle your inner architecture. It is the moment you choose equanimity when all reason suggests panic. We must therefore redefine choice itself. Choice is not a cosmic lever that alters the laws of physics. Rather, choice is an act of focused attention, a deliberate selection of values. When life presents us with three options, despair, rage, or measured response, free will allows us to select the third path every time. The synthesis, if we dare call it that, suggests a dynamic partnership. Fate sets the stage and dictates the plot's inevitable complications. Free will writes our character arcs within those limitations. Our choices determine whether we fall victim to circumstance or rise above it through sheer internal force of character. We are given necessity as the backdrop, but we must provide the meaning. To live in this harmony is an active commitment, a daily discipline akin to building a mental gymnasium. It means practicing benevolent surrender, the deep understanding that, while you cannot control the outcome of your efforts, you can and must always control the quality of your intention. You give your very best effort, acknowledging its limits, and then release the need for perfection or guaranteed success. This is trust in the process itself. Ultimately, our journey through fate and free will leads us back to a singular place, the present moment. The past belongs entirely to necessity. It has happened, and we cannot undo the stain of yesterday's regret. The future belongs to the sheer unknown, an endless fog that offers no certainties. But the now, this breath inhaled and exhaled in this very second, this is the only terrain where choice possesses any genuine meaning or power. To live fully means refusing to be consumed by either the guilt of yesterday's mistakes or the anxiety of tomorrow's fears. It means grounding oneself firmly in the reality of the present, utilizing the small window of time that exists between stimulus and response. This gap, the interval of consciousness, is the vast ocean of freedom. So, when we stand once more at the crossroads, this profound realization guides our step. The paths may indeed seem etched by forces larger than ourselves. They are dictated by context, by time, by human nature itself. But observe closely. While fate maps the possible routes, it cannot write the meaning of your journey. That singular authorship, the dedication to ethical action, the commitment to self-mastery, the courage in bearing hardship with grace, that belongs entirely and absolutely to you. The destination is perhaps inevitable, but the character with which you travel there is a masterpiece designed by free will. We begin by feeling the subtle weight of expectation. It is an invisible cloak we wear, the conviction that life must unfold a certain way, that success guarantees happiness, or that other people should think of us in a particular manner. This burden comes from what we call shoulds. We cling to mental rules. I should be more skilled. I should have found love by now. I should not feel this sadness. These shoulds are chains forged entirely in the abstract realms of our minds. They restrict our perceived freedom far more effectively than any external force could. When we operate under these assumptions, we treat life as a checklist to be completed rather than an experience to be lived. We measure ourselves against impossible standards and find ourselves perpetually falling short. The pain does not come from failing the world. It comes from failing our own imagined mandates. True freedom, therefore, is not about achieving some grand external goal. It is about dismantling these internalized shoulds, about giving permission to ourselves to simply be where we are, imperfectly and entirely. Consider the moments when you feel intense frustration or deep disappointment. Often, that feeling arises not from the event itself, but from the gap between what was expected to happen and what actually happened. We treat reality as if it were a flawed performance of our desires. To practice benevolent surrender is to recognize this pattern. It means actively questioning those self-imposed rules. Why should I feel guilty for needing rest? Who mandated that joy must always look like achievement? By pulling back the assumptions, we create space. Space between stimulus and response. That small, empty space, that is where our authentic choice lives. The power of surrender is not passivity. It is a radical declaration of internal sovereignty. It is deciding that your worth is inherent, independent of external validation or adherence to any rigid life script. We must learn to love the indeterminate nature of being alive. The uncertainty itself is the canvas. If we only plan for outcomes where we succeed and are validated, we paint a dull picture. But when we embrace the unexpected detours, the sudden changes in direction, that is when the true color appears. The goal is not merely to accept what happens, but to actively appreciate that acceptance as a source of power. It transforms resistance into resilience. Instead of fighting the current, we learn to navigate it. We become masters of our own internal reaction to the flow of time and event. This surrender is not giving up control entirely. Rather, it is recognizing where control was always an illusion in the first place. The events, the kindnesses, the losses, the illnesses, they are outside of us. They are merely data points given by fate. What we control absolutely, what belongs solely within our domain, is the meaning we assign to these points. It is the narrative structure we build from the unpredictable material of existence. This realization is liberating. It moves us beyond the exhausted cycle of trying desperately to engineer a perfect life, and into the quiet, steady work of simply living it fully. By discarding the shoulds, we reclaim our present moment as sacred territory, a space only defined by immediate presence and unburdened intention. This purified existence, free from external expectation, is where genuine freedom takes root. We have spent time contemplating the invisible threads that guide our existence. We questioned if every action we take is a mere ripple, an inevitable consequence of some previous movement, much like the hypothetical flutter of a butterfly's wings. This idea suggests a grand tapestry already woven, where even the smallest breath might be accounted for, meaning that perhaps the concept of true choice is itself an elegant illusion. If the initial conditions were set billions of years ago, if every variable, from cosmic drift to the mood of a single passerby, is predetermined, then where exactly does our self-determination reside? It is easy to fall into paralyzing fatalism here, to conclude that since everything was always meant to be, nothing we do matters. We feel trapped by this realization, weighed down by the immense force of inevitability. Yet, philosophy demands that we look deeper, past the simplicity of cause and effect, to find where our unique power still resides. The fatalistic mindset is not merely a passive resignation. It is a sophisticated misdirection. It asks us to confuse mere predictability with absolute necessity. Yes, perhaps the macrocosm moves according to elegant physical laws. Perhaps the rising tide is guaranteed by the moon's gravity, but that knowledge of external law does not dictate the sovereign state of our interior self. The dilemma demands we find a fault line, a point where the cosmic thread encounters the uniquely human spirit and refuses to yield its pattern. This point of resistance, this moment of internal judgment, is where freedom takes root. Consider the mind itself. It is a unique engine capable of interpreting input wildly differently. Two people can witness the exact same event. A harsh word spoken, a sudden failure, a beautiful sunset. The external stimulus is identical. The fate dictated the scene. Yet one person interprets this experience as catastrophic proof of their inadequacy, leading to cycles of despair and withdrawal. Another interprets it not as personal condemnation, but as simple data, a momentary struggle that reveals an opportunity for resilience. Both lived through the same event, yet their resulting internal landscapes are radically different. The former became paralyzed by perceived doom. The latter found a path toward necessary change. This difference, this qualitative split in response, is the arena of free will. The great mistake we make when discussing fate versus choice is treating them as mutually exclusive forces, as if one must violently destroy the other for our understanding to be whole. But history and the nature of existence suggest a more profound collaboration. Fate may establish the boundaries of our field. It presents us with the storm, the challenge, the unpredictable human heart. It builds the container in which we must live. Free will, however, is not the ability to change the weather or rewrite others' thoughts. Rather, free will is the capacity to choose our internal disposition towards that unavoidable reality. It is the continuous power to declare, moment by moment, how we are going to interpret what has been thrust upon us. Think of the character of Marcus Aurelius. He was a man subjected to endless war, plague, and the capricious whims of fate, the physical embodiment of struggle. Yet, his enduring philosophical output is not merely an acceptance of what happened, but a sustained exercise in choosing how he would judge it. His greatest battleground was never on the battlefield. It was within the fortress of his own mind. He mastered the art of internal sovereignty. He realized that if fate could only control the physical world outside him, then the citadel of his judgment remained entirely unbreachable. The depth of this passage requires us to redefine what we mean by choice. It is less about selecting an action from a menu of predetermined outcomes. It is more fundamentally about choosing our ascent. When faced with suffering, choice means deciding whether that suffering will merely be endured physically, or if it will be allowed to corrupt one's internal narrative, to teach bitterness, fear, or rage. The power lies in preventing the interpretation itself from becoming the cage. We can consent to reality while simultaneously refusing to consent to its meaning. This refusal is where our moral agency resides. This perspective does not negate the genuine weight of cosmic forces. It acknowledges them fully. The harsh realities, the structural unfairness of life, the unshakable laws of physics and human psychology. But it elevates our internal capacity above mere reactivity. It suggests that while we may never control the wind, we can meticulously control the sails of our spirit. We must train ourselves not to be victims of circumstance, but philosophical navigators, charting a course based on reasoned judgment rather than emotional impulse or perceived inevitability. The weight of this dilemma is immense because it forces us to look inward at the deepest core of human dignity. The ability to choose meaning even when all external signs point toward chaos. To be truly free is not to live in an effortless paradise, but to possess the unshakable internal conviction that no matter what life throws at you, be it profound disappointment, betrayal by loved ones, or the sudden loss of everything, you retain absolute power over the quality and dignity of your response. Fate dictates the challenge. We choose the response, thereby shaping our own inner meaning into something truly free. We have spent time considering the boundaries of our power. We looked at what we cannot change, the storms that gather on the horizon, the opinions others hold for us, the random chance of birth or passing. We were taught to release these external chains, recognizing that our tranquility could not be taken from without. But there remains a difficult truth. Acceptance is often misunderstood. Many here accept your fate and think it means passive resignation, a gentle surrender into helplessness. This understanding is incomplete and dangerously so. True philosophy does not ask us to simply endure what happens. It asks us to love it. It asks us to embrace necessity. This concept is known as Amor Fati. Amor Fati is perhaps the hardest call of all, loving one's own fate. It means more than mere tolerance. Tolerance suggests enduring something distasteful until it passes. Love, however, requires integrating that thing into who you are, making it a necessary part of your existence, and finding virtue within its necessity. Consider every difficulty, every failure, every loss you have ever experienced. Under the soft light of reflection, can we truly call those moments bad? Or were they merely material? Were they the fuel required to temper the steel of your character? The Stoics argued that nothing external could fundamentally damage a soul that was correctly ordered by reason. The necessity of life suggests that every single event, good or agonizing, must contribute to the tapestry of who you become. There is no random accident in the grand unfolding of things, only necessary cause and effect. If we accept this deep structure of necessity, our entire relationship with suffering changes. Suffering ceases to be viewed as an opponent to be defeated, but rather as a prerequisite for growth. To practice, Amor Fati is therefore an active revolutionary act. It is not resigning yourself to bad luck. It is choosing the perspective that even this hardship, too, will serve a purpose vital to your deepest self. You must find the teaching within the tragedy. You must extract the strength from the defeat. Think of yourself as a potter's wheel. The clay you are molded from is not just what you appear to be today. It is shaped by every throw, every pressure, every unexpected twist applied to it throughout time. Each setback was not an aberration. It was the necessary force required for your unique form to emerge. To resent the throwing hand would be to resent your own potential. The greatest barrier we face is our attachment to the idea that life should follow a predetermined, comfortable script, a narrative where all stakes are low and outcomes are favorable. When reality forces an unscheduled deviation, when the path curves sharply into difficult terrain, our natural instinct is rebellion. We fight it. We complain against its necessity. But what if fighting its necessity prevents us from fully experiencing the virtue it demands? What if that very friction, the grinding conflict between what we wish and what must be, is precisely the material required to sharpen our understanding of genuine freedom? This brings us to a critical distinction. We have repeatedly defined free will not as the power to change events, but as the radical autonomy over our judgment. Amor Fati does not diminish this internal sovereignty. It strengthens it immensely. By loving necessity, we accept that the stage, the unavoidable reality unfolding around us, is perfect, exactly as it must be for us to act upon it. The canvas of your life is drawn by fate, yes, but the colors you choose to apply, the emotional responses, the moral judgments, the deliberate commitments of the will, those remain solely yours. The necessity tells you what happened. Free will decides how much that event means to you. This acceptance demands profound courage. It requires us to look at our failures not as indictments of our worth, but as instructional data points. You must say, with conviction and quiet certainty, I embrace this challenge. I do not just endure it, I welcome it, knowing the lesson embedded within its difficulty will be vital to my journey toward excellence. The highest form of freedom is not the ability to choose any path you desire in a moment of weakness, but the profound calm found in accepting the way things are, and then choosing the best response nonetheless. To embrace necessity is to realize that every breath taken, every struggle met, every joy received, was part of an unbroken chain leading right back to this very moment, the moment where you choose your meaning. And in this act of conscious valuation, in this deliberate act of loving what must be, resides the truest power of the human spirit. We have spent chapters examining the tension between what is predetermined and what we believe to be our absolute choice. We have wrestled with concepts like necessary acceptance or Amor Fati, learning that simply enduring life is not enough. One must actively engage with its inevitabilities. We understood that fate sets the stage, the seasons, the unpredictable other people, the sudden storms of illness or grief, but we began to realize that our free will writes the script. However, what happens when the knowledge of a future event itself becomes the greatest weight? To stand at this precipice of foreknowledge is to confront the ultimate challenge to human autonomy. Consider this thought experiment. Imagine you are given perfect clarity about the worst day of your life. You see it unfold in vivid detail. The conversation that will shatter a relationship, the failure that will derail a career, the personal trauma that seems insurmountable. This knowledge is not merely informational, it is predictive and absolute. Does having this total foreknowledge strip away the essential savoring of being alive? Or does it provide an unparalleled gift, preparation? The mind naturally resists the idea of certainty. We live by conjecture, by hope, by the messy ambiguity that defines human existence. We are designed to be surprised. Surprise is a fundamental ingredient in joy and growth. If every tremor, every fall, and every moment of profound triumph were painted on us like a script we could read through, would the curtain still feel magical when it rises? The inherent mystery, this uncertainty, feels far more vital than any perfect blueprint. But let us not confuse mystery with meaninglessness. For knowledge forces us to ask a deeper question. If we know the inevitable pain ahead, does that knowledge permit us to alter our actions in the present moment, even if those changes feel insufficient? Can knowing an ending allow us to truly inhabit the journey without being merely observers of fate's curtain call? The immediate temptation is paralysis. Faced with a foreseen tragedy, some might simply wait for it, resignation settling over them like dust. They might believe that since the outcome is fixed, any effort they expend today is pointless, a wasted expenditure against an unchangeable current. This is the seductive comfort of fatalism, a surrender to inaction in the name of knowing. It implies a retreat into intellectual safety rather than genuine engagement. The truly free mind understands that knowledge does not equal power. Knowing what will happen allows us the rare chance to practice virtue in defiance of predictability itself. If we know we will face loss, can we use the time before it to cultivate deep, radical appreciation? Can we consciously choose empathy when we know rejection awaits? This is not merely preparation for survival. It is a profound act of internal rebellion against perceived necessity. The greatest weight of prediction is therefore shifted from external events to our internal response. The true dilemma presented by foreknowledge is this: if we are guaranteed the experience of suffering, what must we choose about how we bear it? Do we choose bitterness because it was foreseen, or do we choose resilience and fortitude because we have the time to practice them? The mind trained in Stoicism learns that prediction does not remove necessary action. It only reframes its urgency. If you know a challenge is coming, your job today is not to prevent the challenge, for fate's river flows regardless of our wishes. but to build the strongest possible character for the person who must meet it. You become an architect of yourself in anticipation of necessity. This brings us to the subtle distinction between prediction and potential. A prediction suggests what will be. Potential suggests what can be, given enough intentional effort and internal shift. We spend so much time worrying about the definitive nature of what will be that we neglect the immense power held within what can be. The weight, then, is not on fate's accuracy. It is on our willingness to act meaningfully in the face of potential known limitations. We must treat every single moment not as a step towards an inevitable endpoint, but as a self-contained crucible, a proving ground for virtue. This chapter forces us to recognize that true freedom is found precisely at the intersection where prediction meets action. It is the paradox of knowing. If we know the struggle, it does not negate its difficulty. Rather, it gives context to our effort and purpose. We do not fight fate by attempting to change its schedule. We face it by deepening our internal understanding of what truly belongs only within us: judgment, intention, and character. To master life is therefore not to evade the foretold disaster, but to become so proficient at choosing your inner response that even unavoidable suffering serves merely as a raw material for virtue. We have approached the question of fate and free will from many angles. We looked at external chains, like social expectations. We studied powerful natural forces, like the currents of time. But perhaps we have viewed these two concepts through the wrong lens entirely. For too long, we may have defined freedom as the ability to choose outcomes, to guarantee a specific future or force a desired event into existence. And when that definition fails in the face of the world's randomness, we feel trapped, believing fate has stolen our power. But what if the very object of our definition is flawed? What if we are attempting to measure an internal state using only external metrics? Consider this. When you attempt to define free will by comparing it against fixed destinies, you inevitably find yourself in a stalemate. You ask, can my choice change the river's flow? The question itself assumes a mechanical relationship. That choice must act upon event. This is where our understanding begins to fracture. The essence of free will, truly examined, is not about choosing events. An event is something that simply happens. It arrives unbidden, regardless of our desires or intentions. You cannot summon rain merely by wishing for it. Similarly, you do not control the whims of others, nor can you command a political tide to turn based on your moral conviction alone. The deepest freedom, therefore, must reside in something invisible, something internal and utterly self-contained. It is not located at the destination. It is found in the mechanism by which we process the journey itself. This chapter asks us to redefine free will, fundamentally shift its locus from doing to assenting. The choice that defines a genuinely free life is the choice of interpretation. When hardship strikes, when unfairness occurs, when the world proves indifferent, these are unavoidable realities. They constitute the necessary stage. Fate has already painted the backdrop. It shows us the conflict. But free will does not write the scene. It writes our meaning within the scene. Imagine a great storm rolling in. You cannot stop the clouds from gathering, nor can you command the wind to cease its roar. The storm is necessary. It happens. Its force is given. This is destiny's grip. But within that roaring storm, there are choices of resistance. Do you curse the sky? Do you panic and run blindly toward perceived safety? Or do you pause, look up at the tempest, and decide to meet it with deliberate stillness, accepting the wetness, the cold, the sheer immensity of its force? That internal decision, that choice to simply respond rather than react, is where our sovereignty resides. This is moving beyond mere acceptance. Acceptance suggests merely enduring what happens, but free will implies an active mental posture toward it. It means acknowledging the event's reality while simultaneously declaring the manner in which that event shall touch your inner life. You are choosing your judgment regarding what has occurred. This choice of internal disposition becomes the ultimate, unshakable territory of self-mastery. If fate determines that suffering will arrive, if it dictates a time of loss or failure, it cannot determine the quality of your mind when you face it. It cannot mandate that despair is your only response, nor can it compel rage to be your only shield. These terrible emotions are potent forces, but they are also mere judgments, mental narratives we build in reaction to pain. And because a judgment is simply an opinion, one that can always be revised, the psychological battle for freedom is thus redefined. It is not fought against external giants, it is waged within the subtle architecture of our own thoughts. We must become diligent editors of our minds. When pain whispers, it suggests we are wronged or unloved or undeserving. This whisper is an interpretation, a judgment layered over a neutral fact. Our task is to peel back that judgment and ask, is this fact, or merely my reaction to the fact? By pausing at that microscopic moment of internal questioning, we halt the power of fate's suggestion. We reclaim our authorship. The deepest freedom is knowing that no matter how terrible the circumstance, your ultimate responsibility rests only upon your own ascent. You are free to choose what you permit to enter your inner citadel. If fear arrives like a cold breath on your neck, you are not condemned to surrender to it. You can observe it. You can see it pass through without allowing it to occupy permanent residence in the core of your being. This redefinition is profound because it grants us enormous power, yet demands enormous vigilance. To exercise this kind of internal sovereignty requires us to constantly dismantle our own habitual narratives. We must unlearn the comfortable chains of expectation, remembering that I should is merely a judgment pretending to be law. Instead, we practice recognizing what truly is, an indeterminate reality, demanding only our presence and our reasoned, contemplative response. Free will, therefore, is not a miraculous escape hatch from destiny's script. It is the quiet, revolutionary act of deciding that despite everything fate delivers, the triumphs, the disasters, the indignities, you will meet it with intentional judgment. You choose your meaning, and in that self-chosen meaning lies the only truly unassailable freedom. We stand now at the edge. The wind is cold, biting against us, carrying with it the weight of all the paths not taken and the sheer necessity of choosing one. This moment feels absolute, doesn't it? As if everything hinges on this single step, a pivot point where destiny seems to demand a final declaration. But look closer. Is the force here simply fate demanding compliance, or is there an active space, a void waiting for us to fill with intent? We have spent so long debating two grand opponents. Fate, which suggests every moment was written before time began, and free will, which demands a radical, unpredictable autonomy. We imagine them locked in battle across millennia. Yet, standing here, facing this unavoidable curtain call of choice, the conflict fades away into a quiet realization. The truth, as we now see it, is that they are not opposing armies. They are two necessary rhythms. Fate sets the stage. Fate provides the weather, the characters who challenge us, and the gravity that pulls us down. It furnishes the material, the insurmountable odds, the unexpected grief, the crushing certainty of limitation. But free will is not the ability to rewrite the script written by destiny. No, it is something far quieter, yet infinitely stronger. It is the authorship of meaning. The core lesson we must internalize right now, in this instant of pure choice, is that power never resides in changing what happens. That power belongs entirely to how we choose to receive it. It is not about resisting the inevitable storm. It is about deciding whether we will face the downpour with dread and collapse, or with dignity and measured resilience. Think back to the internal chains we dismantled earlier, the expectations of should. Those were little mental tyrants, convincing us that our worth depended on a specific outcome, a perfect relationship, an achievement guaranteed. But what if those shoulds are simply fate's way of keeping us busy, distracting us from the real work? The true sovereignty is realizing that even when life throws unavoidable tragedy, a profound loss, an injustice, at your feet, you retain the ultimate veto power over your judgment. This choice in this instant is not about choosing a direction on the map. It is about choosing our internal ascent. When reality screams at us with overwhelming despair, we have the freedom to choose calm observation instead. When faced with undeniable failure, we can choose to view it not as an ending, but as raw material, a lesson waiting to be forged into virtue. The paradox of this moment is that true choice only becomes visible when all other paths are blocked. The wind does not care what you want. The storm will break regardless of your wishes. This very certainty of external force frees us up entirely to focus inward, making the mind our impregnable fortress once more. We cease trying to control the tides and begin mastering the ship itself. The deepest understanding is that the most powerful form of freedom is benevolent surrender. But this is not a soft giving up. It is an active declaration of faith in process. It is saying, I will accept what cannot be changed with all my energy so that all my remaining strength can be dedicated to perfecting how I respond. Look at your breath right now. Feel the slow rhythm entering and leaving your body. That steady cadence, indifferent to the swirling chaos around us, that is where free will lives. It exists in the infinitesimal pause between the stimulus and your reaction. The world presents an event, fate delivers the hammer blow. But you, through careful inner practice, you determine whether the response is panic or measured assessment. The weight of existence is immense, a crushing confluence of random chance and predetermined consequence. We cannot escape this truth. Some things will break, other people will fail us. The economy may collapse. These are facts delivered by fate that we simply must endure. But within every unavoidable hardship, every necessary suffering, as the Stoics taught, lies an opportunity, perfectly tailored for character development. It is not a setback. It is tuition paid in the currency of experience. Therefore, let us redefine what we mean by choice. Choice is acknowledging that life is fundamentally uncontrollable. Our capacity to choose rests solely on our commitment to virtue in the face of this profound uncertainty. We must practice viewing every difficulty, the insult, the betrayal, the crushing limitation, as mere fuel for the divine forge within us. This mental discipline transforms inevitable tragedy into a catalyst for self-mastery. The path ahead does not promise ease, it promises meaning. The journey is defined by how we choose to interpret the unscripted cruelty or unpredictable kindness of the universe. By accepting necessity, embracing our fate with grace, and directing our responses purely through the lens of reason and virtue, we finally find a freedom that transcends mere possibility, a hard-won internal sovereignty, capable of surviving any storm. The moment of pure choice is not when you take a step. It is the silent instant before your muscles contract. It is the moment where clarity cuts through panic. And in that space, standing perfectly centered between what is and what must be, we finally understand. Fate provides the vast backdrop, but our will writes the soul's enduring epic. We have journeyed through the labyrinthine relationship between fate and choice, learning that these twin forces are not adversaries locked in eternal conflict. Instead, They are collaborators, weaving the tapestry of existence with both inevitable threads and spaces for our own hand to draw meaning. If we look back at the crossroads where our contemplation began, we realize the true mystery was never about deciding which force was stronger, but recognizing how they operate together. Fate sets the magnificent stage, establishing the unavoidable realities, the cycles of seasons, the unpredictability of human hearts, the very limitations of our physical lives. These are the fixed parameters of the play, but fate does not write the script for us. It merely provides the scene and the cast of characters. That is where free will enters, taking its most profound power. Free will is not the miraculous ability to alter the external backdrop. We cannot command a storm to cease or persuade another soul against their deepest convictions. No, free will is something far more subtle, yet vastly more powerful. It is the sovereignty over our inner judgment. Think of your mind, not as an open arena exposed to every sudden blow of circumstance, but as a meticulously crafted citadel. This citadel is your inner fortress, built with reason and virtue as its foundational stones. Fate may send shockwaves that test every wall of this structure: unavoidable grief, unexpected failure, crushing betrayal. These events are external assaults. They can breach the surface, yes, but if the foundations of your judgment remain sound, the heart of the citadel remains untouched. The philosophy we encounter here is one of deep internal discipline, a commitment to treating our minds like an unbreachable bastion against chaos. We must understand that what truly diminishes us is not the suffering itself, for suffering is merely material, but the internal commentary we attach to it. It is the judgment that screams this should never happen, or I cannot bear this injustice, which undermines us from within. By contrast, adopting a stance of benevolent surrender does not mean passive weakness. Rather, it is an active and militant commitment to accepting reality exactly as it presents itself, without demanding that it conform to our emotional expectations. This acceptance is the most difficult form of voluntary action, because it asks us to let go of the reins of desirable outcomes. It requires us to find meaning in what simply is. To master this inner citadel means cultivating a radical detachment from external approval and external events. It means recognizing that your worth, your core self, cannot be predicated upon winning every battle or avoiding every perceived slight. The outer world will always resist perfect harmony. People will act imperfectly. Tragedy remains an immutable law of existence. If we build our identities on the premise of flawless external control, we are building on sand, and everything we construct will eventually crumble under the weight of reality. Instead, we anchor ourselves to virtue. Virtue, courage when fear screams otherwise, temperance when desire blinds, justice in action regardless of reward. These qualities are internal acts that no outer force can confiscate from you. They become your truest forms of self-possession. We must constantly train our minds to pause, that moment between the stimulus and the reaction. That infinitesimal breath is where all power resides. It is here, in this space of pure choice, that we declare our internal independence. We are choosing not to simply react. We are choosing how to assent. Are we going to allow external misfortune to become a narrative of victimhood? Or will we refuse that role, selecting instead the meaning that hardship provides for character building? This practice transforms us from mere recipients of fate's hand into active co-authors of our internal experience. The goal is not happiness, which remains an elusive commodity dependent on fortune. The goal is resilience, and by extension, a steady state of inner peace derived purely from self-mastery. Imagine standing before unavoidable suffering, a profound loss, perhaps, or enduring injustice. Your physical body cannot stop the blow, nor can your will dictate what another person thinks of you tomorrow. But your mind, your judgment, that remains solely under your control. You possess the ultimate veto power over how much an event can truly hurt you. It is this mastery, this conscious choosing of our internal assent to reality, that constitutes the height of human freedom. It is the architecture of the resilient spirit. We are called not to escape the vicissitudes of life, but to inhabit them fully, treating every hardship, every unexpected blow, as necessary material for shaping a stronger self. Every inevitable defeat becomes practice in humility. Every random encounter becomes a test of virtue. The inner citadel demands vigilance. It requires us to reject the tempting comfort of complaint and the paralyzing weight of what might have been. We must simply face the reality before us, the cold rain, the unexpected setback, the profound silence after conflict, and ask ourselves, what is the most virtuous response here? By constantly directing our focus inward, away from the shifting sands of external outcomes, we build a self-sufficiency that no fate can breach and no misfortune can dismantle. This internal fortress becomes the only sanctuary truly ours, standing ready when the rest of the world threatens to dissolve into chaos. To live within this citadel is to understand that while life will always present unavoidable challenges, the rough winds and sinking ships are part of the journey. Our response, our judgment, remains irrevocably and beautifully free. We have traveled through the profound questions of destiny and autonomy. We learned that merely existing in a world governed by fate is not enough. We must understand where our true power lies. Throughout this journey, we questioned every perceived boundary, the boundaries set by others' expectations, the limitations imposed by physical reality, and even the limits of our own minds. The final realization brings us to the acceptance of limitation itself. This does not mean surrendering hope or becoming passive observers. Rather, it is the most radical act of self-mastery, drawing clear, unflinching lines around what we can influence and what must simply be allowed to be. Consider the nature of freedom. We have often defined it as doing whatever we wish at all times without restraint. But true philosophical freedom, the kind that sustains the soul through hardship, is far more disciplined. It is the wisdom to know when to stop fighting and begin observing. The world operates within parameters. The tides rise regardless of our desire. The seasons change whether we are ready for them or not. We cannot command the past to reverse its course, nor can we force an unrelated person to feel compassion at will. To continuously waste energy battling these immovable facts is exhausting and futile. It creates a constant internal friction, leaving us perpetually disappointed because reality simply refuses to conform to our highest hopes. This recognition of limitation frees us from the tyranny of shoulds. We realize that many of the deepest forms of suffering are not caused by external events, by loss or betrayal, but by our fierce refusal to accept what is. We want life to be simpler, more predictable, and infinitely kinder than it actually is. The disciplined mind, however, understands that boundaries are not prisons. They are necessary structures. They provide the very framework against which virtue can shine. If there were no limits, if every outcome were within our immediate control, effort would lose its meaning. The struggle itself becomes the discipline, and the acceptance of limits becomes the path to profound power. The question shifts from how do I change this awful circumstance to, given these inescapable circumstances, how shall I choose my response? This is where true liberty resides, in the internal negotiation with what cannot be undone. It requires a moment of stillness, a breath held between stimulus and reaction, a moment that acts as the great sovereign space. We must cultivate a posture of benevolent surrender. But let us understand this surrender not as giving up, but as redirecting power. Instead of aiming outward to change fate's design, we direct all our energy inward, mastering judgment, perfecting attention, and cultivating resilience within the citadel of the self. The human mind has an extraordinary capacity for imaginative resistance. We invent narratives that require life to conform to them, narratives where success is guaranteed, where failure is impossible, or where happiness must be permanent. When fate presents us with chaos, our natural instinct is to fight the disorder itself. Yet, history shows us that resisting disorder only strengthens it. The greatest act of free will, therefore, is accepting the inherent mystery and uncertainty of existence. It means recognizing that some doors will remain closed, that some pain will pierce us deeper than we can bear, and that effort alone is not a guarantee of outcome. And yet, in this acceptance lies an unparalleled freedom. It grants us permission to redefine success. Success is no longer the achievement of perfect external circumstances. It is the fidelity to our own principles, regardless of the cost or the consequence. It is waking up each day and choosing, anew, to meet reality with dignity, courage, and impartial judgment. This realization is liberating because it removes the pressure of absolute outcome control. We are freed from the agonizing task of trying to guarantee a perfect future. Instead, we gain the singular focus on making the present moment as virtuous as possible. The past belongs only to memory, offering lessons but no power over action. The future remains a realm of pure potentiality, demanding nothing from us right now. The profound peace comes when we align our deepest values with the reality of limitation. When we stop pleading for an easier story and instead celebrate the complexity, the struggle, and the irreducible uncertainty of life itself. We accept that necessity is not merely something to endure, but a sculptor's hammer, using difficult material, our challenging circumstances, to carve out the finest version of ourselves. This acceptance empowers us to live fully in the immediate now. The present moment is where fate gives us its raw material, and free will performs the art of meaning-making. We are not masters of events, but we are masters of our regard for those events. This subtle shift in power, from external command to internal disposition, is the entire architecture of a well-lived life. We have spent time discussing the vast tension between what is written and what we choose. We spoke of destiny as a river that flows inevitably to the sea, yet insisting that our will can carve its own path through the rocks along the banks. Perhaps we thought true freedom meant altering the course of that mighty current. But if we look closely, we realize something profound about both fate and choice. They are not adversaries locked in eternal combat. Instead, they are partners, two halves of a single magnificent performance. We spent years trying to control the external world, the volatile opinions of others, the capricious turn of fortune, the events that happened outside the shelter of our own minds. We were so busy staring at the rising tides and the passing ships that we missed the most immediate battleground, the space within us. This internal battlefield is where the real drama unfolds. The next great step toward wisdom requires courage, a vulnerability I hope you are ready for. It means looking inward and facing the expectations we have built up around ourselves, the invisible chains forged not by law or circumstance, but by our own minds. These chains manifest as shoulds. Consider them. I should be successful. I should be happy in my relationships. I should recover from this loss with grace. I should act exactly like a good person would. These statements, these internalized mandates, sound superficially helpful, promising order and direction. But they are profound restrictions. They suggest that our value is conditional, that we only deserve joy if we meet certain criteria, or that we only count as worthy if we achieve specific outcomes. The shoulds build a delicate cage around the self. They transform life into a list of mandatory performances. We cease to live simply and become striving employees in our own lives, constantly terrified of being found wanting by an imaginary audience of perfect expectations. When we operate from these shoulds, our perceived freedom shrinks dramatically. We are not free. We are merely optimizing performance according to outdated rules. Our energy is spent maintaining the illusion that if we just check one more box, the should box, we will finally unlock genuine peace or acceptance. The philosophy does not ask us to abandon effort entirely. No, effort and discipline remain vital tools, but it asks us to distinguish between necessary goals, which require action, and debilitating expectations, which simply breed guilt and anxiety when reality proves messy. We must practice a benevolent surrender that is more than just accepting what happens. It is an active declaration of internal sovereignty. It means recognizing the inherent worth within you that exists entirely independently of your achievements or your relationship's perfection. When we shed the shoulds, we do not become aimless. Rather, our focus sharpens dramatically on genuine self-authorship. We stop waiting for life to validate us, and instead, we start validating ourselves in the moment, regardless of whether that moment looks like a victory or merely a quiet continuation. The true liberation is realizing that your being is not defined by what you must do, but by who you are when all expectations are stripped away. It is the recognition that uncertainty itself is not a gap to be feared, but the raw material of existence. This journey asks us to sit with discomfort, to watch the stories we tell ourselves, the shoulds narratives, and gently label them. This is an expectation, not a truth. With each such label, one more invisible tether dissolves. The power we seek was never outside. It was locked away in our agreement to live up to these fabricated scripts. To cast off the shoulds is to make oneself whole again. It means embracing the beautiful, messy incompleteness of simply existing, a state where your worth requires nothing more than the truth of your moment. Let us learn to find freedom not in achieving something perfect, but in allowing ourselves to be imperfectly present. We have spent much time discussing the edges of choice. We spoke of how fate seems to whisper its patterns through history and nature, suggesting a predetermined script for every life. And we equally examined free will, that vast internal landscape where we feel we can genuinely choose our path, making our own decisions from scratch. But dwelling on these two grand concepts, fate and free will, can be a profound trap of the mind. It forces us to view them as polar opposites, locked in some epic, dramatic battle for human autonomy. The truth, however, is far more subtle and much quieter than we imagined. The mistake lies in thinking that either fate or freedom must win a war. Instead, they are not adversaries. They are two necessary partners, like the light and shadow on a fresco wall. One cannot exist without the other to define it. To view them as conflicting forces is to miss their fundamental relationship, synergy. They do not fight for control. They collaborate to create the reality we inhabit. This realization leads us to ask ourselves where true power actually resides. Is it in predicting tomorrow's outcome, or in deciding how we react right now? The answer, as always, pulls us back with gentle insistence to a single point, the present moment. Only here, in this very instant, does fate and free will truly meet and coexist. This is our arena of power. The past is irrevocably set. It is written history, We cannot change what was done, we can only learn from it. The future, though vivid in our imaginings, remains unformed potentiality. It exists as a cloud of probabilities, shifting with every passing breath, and therefore holding no tangible power over us right now. Only this instant, the breathing in, the momentary pause before the exhale, is absolutely ours. The temptation is immense to try and steer our destiny by focusing too much on what we want tomorrow or regretting what was lost yesterday. But when we focus outwards, demanding that fate comply with our expectations, we diminish ourselves into mere supplicants waiting for a grand sign. We become overly concerned with the external arc of events, the promotion denied, the love withdrawn, the natural disaster that strikes. This overfocusing is what creates profound anxiety. It is trying to control the river's flow by building dams on every tributary. The dam will fail, and we will find ourselves exhausted, having spent all our energy fighting an unstoppable current. This struggle drains the spirit of its vitality. We are constantly expending monumental mental energy simply trying to manage the things that were never meant to be managed. Our training, therefore, must always pivot back to this single, immutable truth, internal judgment. Free will is not a power over outcomes, it is a supreme sovereignty over our minds. It is the capacity to observe an event, a setback, a betrayal, an unforeseen difficulty, and then choose its meaning. The event itself is neutral. The interpretation we layer upon it, that judgmental color we paint onto reality, is where all our genuine freedom resides. This internal choosing of assent is far stronger than any external force. Imagine a great stone dropped into deep water. That ripple moves outward, affecting everything nearby. That is fate's unfolding, the inevitability of physics and circumstance. But what matters is not merely observing the wave, but understanding that your judgment dictates how deeply you feel it. Do you perceive this unavoidable event as utter catastrophe, or do you recognize it simply as a difficult challenge? The difference in meaning creates an infinitely powerful separation between external reality and internal response. When we practice benevolent surrender, we are not resigning ourselves to laziness or apathy. Quite the opposite. It is an act of ferocious engagement with life itself. It is saying, yes, this happens, fully acknowledging its presence, and yet refusing to let it define our core being. We embrace the entirety of what is, the sunshine and the shadow, the joy and the inevitable pain, as the material necessary for our growth. The flow, or what we might call the present tense awareness, asks us to step out of the narrative roles of victim or master planner. It simply asks us to be deeply present observers. The past is storybook writing, the future is speculative poetry. But right now, this moment is raw experience. It is paint on a clean canvas, awaiting only our conscious attention. To live here, fully immersed in the now, requires a radical courage. The courage to accept that we are not always sure what comes next. It means moving through uncertainty without fear, knowing that even if the world shifts underfoot, our inner center remains unshakable because it is rooted only in this instant. The mastery of life, then, is never found in altering circumstances or predicting outcomes. It is found right here, suspended between breaths. It is in choosing the meaning when the world presents us with an undeniable fact. It is making the choice, again and yet again, to recognize that our minds are not merely passengers carrying out a pre-written itinerary. They are the active conductors of their own internal orchestra, capable at any moment of changing the tune from despair into dignity. This immediate awareness is where true power sleeps, waiting only for us to gently awaken it. We have traveled this long road, examining the vast territories of destiny and choice. We built the walls of our inner citadels chapter by chapter, learning to find sovereignty within the fragile space between stimulus and response. We learned that fate is not a tyrannical master pulling the strings from backstage. Instead, we discovered it is the architect of the stage itself, a magnificent, uncontrollable theater where life plays out its inevitable drama. The journey has led us to understand a profound truth: that destiny provides the canvas, the material, and even the unforeseen tempestuous weather. But within this vast and predetermined setting, our free will whispers not commands, but an invitation. It asks us not what we must achieve or where we must go, but simply how we choose to stand right now. The final wisdom is not a secret hidden at some distant crossroads. It is not a complex philosophical equation solved by sheer intellect. It resides in the simplest act of acceptance, the art of benevolent surrender. This phrase itself seems paradoxical, does it not? Surrender implies giving up control, yet we have reached this point believing that to truly master ourselves, we must actively relinquish all attempts at mastery. What does it mean to surrender benevolently? It means meeting life's necessary challenges, not with resistance or despairing fight, but with dignity. It is an active choice rooted in deep trust, a radical faith in the process itself. It acknowledges that there are forces too immense for any single lifetime to conquer. There are rivers of existence that simply flow, regardless of our wishes. To surrender benevolently is to fully realize that we have done what was humanly possible with the tools and wisdom we possessed at that precise moment. It means looking back on a difficult passage, a betrayal, a deep disappointment, an unavoidable loss, and knowing that your effort was sufficient, even if the outcome was not what you had hoped for. It is moving past the frantic struggle to predict every variable or control every interaction. Instead, we learn to trust the rhythm of life's unfolding. We accept the necessity of friction. We understand that resistance against what must be is simply wasted energy, a fierce battle fought with no enemy other than our own expectations. This surrender is not passive resignation, however. Resignation suggests defeat, a settling into comfortable inertia. Benevolent surrender is an engagement, a conscious decision to trust the curve of existence while remaining vigorously engaged in virtue and self-improvement. It is choosing to meet reality's totality with an open hand and a steady heart. Imagine standing before an overwhelming storm. You cannot stop the rain, nor can you command the wind to cease its howl. All that remains is your ability to hold your own center, to adjust your posture, to check your breath, and to remember why you started walking into it. That internal fortitude, that resilient core, is where genuine power resides. It is not in changing the weather outside. It is in perfecting the self within. The deepest peace comes when we stop viewing fate as a hurdle to jump over or an enemy to vanquish. Instead, we view it as the material of our own making. Every difficult moment, every perceived injustice, every failure, these are not simply things that happen to us. They are necessary elements that allowed us to become who we needed to be. They are fuel for the soul's enduring fire. This art requires profound self-compassion and objective clarity. It demands that we validate our own best efforts, understanding that merely having done one's utmost was itself a profound victory. This acceptance allows us to shed the heavy burden of what if, freeing up all that vital mental energy for what is actionable in the present. It is an active commitment to living fully in the unfolding moment. We are here, now, suspended between yesterday's unchangeable memories and tomorrow's equally uncertain promise. In this space of pure presence, that quiet pocket where time holds its breath, we find our supreme freedom. Free will becomes the unwavering choice to meet the reality presented without adding layers of excessive judgment or demanding that it conform to a desired narrative. It is choosing grace, even when logic dictates bitterness. The goal, therefore, is not an outcome, nor a perfect life free from suffering. The goal is character. The goal is developing an inner disposition so robust and resilient that when the storm inevitably returns, and it will because that is how existence works, we meet it with profound calm. We greet necessity, acknowledging its power, but refusing to let it dictate our worth or diminish our spirit. This radical act of internal sovereignty, this benevolent surrender, is the culmination of a life well examined and a mind deeply trained in self-acceptance. It is the quiet certainty that although we cannot control the grand script of human existence, we alone possess the sacred power to author the meaning of our response. We have journeyed through a series of profound questions, considering the boundaries of our choice and the inexorable sweep of time. We started by asking if the path we walk is truly our own making, or if it was etched into us before we drew our first breath. Many philosophies offer stark contrasts. One side asserts absolute necessity, the other champions boundless autonomy. Yet, wisdom shows us that these poles do not represent an opposition to be resolved, but rather two essential halves of a single human reality. The error lies in viewing fate and free will as antagonists locked in combat. It is a struggle between opposing armies, implying that only one side can prevail. But life, my friends, does not present itself as a battlefield. It presents itself as a vast, complex symphony. In this symphony, the structure of the piece, the tempo changes, the key shifts, the inherent themes, that is fate. It dictates the parameters, the raw materials of our existence. And yet, we are also the players. We possess the breath and the intention to play our part. The realization that these two forces must collaborate is perhaps the greatest revelation on this journey. Fate does not eliminate choice. Rather, it establishes the canvas upon which free will performs its art. It sets the stage of human drama, the necessity of suffering, the inevitability of change, the looming shadow of loss. But fate only constructs the stage. Free will remains entirely in our hands. It is the ability to compose the meaning of the performance, to choose the intention behind every single note played. The true mastery we seek is not the power to alter the script written by necessity. For some things, the passage of time, the actions of others, the biological limits of our bodies, are unchangeable realities. Trying to fight these immutable currents only exhausts us and diminishes our spirit. Instead, free will directs our internal response. It governs how we accept the constraints that fate places upon us. It is the profound power of assent. Consider this. A bitter draught may be forced upon you by circumstance. That is the unchangeable event dictated by fate. But whether that draught tastes like poison or merely comuveri water, and what narrative meaning we draw from its bitterness, that choice remains entirely ours. Free will becomes the discerning internal judgment. It is the mental refusal to accept mere suffering as meaningless misfortune. This concept of benevolent surrender emerges here with profound clarity. Surrender does not mean passivity, nor does it imply resignation in a weakness. It is the opposite. It is an active declaration of trust and dignity. It is recognizing that while we cannot control external outcomes, the storm, the illness, the capriciousness of the market, we retain absolute sovereignty over our interior world. This inner world, this citadel of judgment, remains inviolable by fate. The harmony, then, is achieved when we cease to view reality as a problem requiring an external solution. Instead, we treat life as raw material for character building. every challenge that necessity presents, every failure, every loss, every unexpected joy, is not merely something that happens to us, but something through which we actively define who we will become. The performance of a well-lived life is therefore an act of conscious co-creation. Fate provides the overwhelming richness and complexity of human experience. Free will teaches us how to find our unique resonance within it. We are given a flawed instrument, our imperfect minds, prone to anxiety and complaint, and fate provides the melody of reality. Our task, armed with the wisdom of internal mastery, is to play that melody not as compelled subjects, but as informed artists. To live in this harmony means accepting the beautiful contradiction, knowing that some things are beyond our power, yet trusting entirely in our capacity for mindful response. It requires us to walk forward, recognizing that while we cannot dictate the movements of fate's grand stage, we forever retain the deepest, most consequential power, the ability to choose how we mean what unfolds around us. This is the final wisdom, accepting the reality as it is, and choosing to elevate our internal state above all external circumstance. We stand once more at the whispering crossroads. The air here feels different now. It carries not the tension of an unanswered question, but the quiet resonance of resolution. Early on, we spoke of fate and free will as opposing forces, a constant battle between what must be and what we choose to be. We searched for a point where one concept defeated the other, where destiny's iron curtain would yield to human volition. Yet, only by traveling this path have we understood that they are not adversaries at all. The initial struggle taught us to fight against fate, railing against the unchangeable circumstances life threw our way. We treated necessity as a prison cell, something to be escaped or fought with sheer will. But every lesson, from the fleeting whisper of the butterfly effect to the relentless discipline of mastering the inner citadel, pointed toward a profound truth. Resistance is the only true captivity. The grand narrative of existence does not allow for our rebellion against what simply is. Certain events, the loss, the illness, the betrayal, the passage of time itself, these are fixed elements of the stage. They exist outside the boundaries of our personal authority. To fight them with fury or despair is merely to deplete ourselves in a losing war against reality's deep currents. Consider all that we have absorbed. That true freedom does not manifest as the power to change external outcomes, but rather in the internal choice of how we interpret and respond to those outcomes. This distinction, so simple yet so profound, was the linchpin moment for every philosophy we examined. It is the realization that our capacity for genuine self-sovereignty resides within the mind itself. The path ahead, therefore, asks us to stop seeing life as a conflict between choice and compulsion. Instead, we must see it as a symphony of collaboration. Fate dictates the score, necessity sets the tempo, but free will is the conductor, choosing how to play the music, the meaning given in that moment's execution. We learned that embracing fate is not passive resignation. It is an active choice. Amor Fati means loving everything that happens, understanding that even the pain, the perceived injustice, or the hardship of yesterday was necessary for the strength we possess today. These are not mere obstacles. They are raw material, the very clay from which our character is molded. The great mistake we often make is believing that our worth depends on perfect outcomes or undisturbed circumstances. We build invisible walls around ourselves based on shoulds. I should succeed. I should be happy. Life should operate according to my desires. These mandated expectations are the most restrictive chains of all, because they promise freedom while actually confining us to a narrow, unbending script. The final mastery we seek is one of benevolent surrender. This is not weakness. It is peak strength. It is the profound internal declaration. I accept the reality of this moment exactly as it is. I acknowledge that the world has shown me its limits, its unavoidable suffering, its unpredictability, and its fixed temporal flow. And within that total acceptance lies my boundless power. Our freedom, ultimately, is the continuous exercise of judgment in the face of the unchangeable. It is standing at a precipice where fate forces us to choose despair or dignity, where it urges rage or quiet resilience. Free will whispers simply, how will you respond? The crossroads before us did not determine our destination. Only those who arrived here and chose how they would walk were able to do so. The roads themselves are fixed by the laws of existence, the gravitational pull of cause and effect. But the meaning we assign to taking a certain path, the courage found in that choice, the integrity with which we endure the journey's difficulty, this meaning is utterly, wholly ours. The unwritten ending is not determined by some celestial hand or fixed decree. It belongs to us. It resides in the conscious commitment, every single day, to observe our judgments and correct them before they solidify into immutable beliefs, to choose benevolence over bitterness, to respond with curiosity instead of condemnation, to recognize that life itself provides all the necessary challenges, the drama, the conflicts, the unyielding opposition, and our highest calling is simply to accept these gifts as the very tools for building an unshakable inner self. The journey shows us that destiny provided the script, but only we write the ending through the active choice of our internal narrative. This is true liberty. It is a freedom measured not by what external forces grant us, but by